Good afternoon, or whatever time you find yourself in when you are watching this video. My name is Steve Ernest. I am the Western Lawman. I'm also one of the partners at the Fortra Law Firm, and there I am the Director of Litigation and Bankruptcy. Today we have another episode of the Campfire Chat, and I'm delighted to have with me Marie Wick of TrustPoint AI. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me today.
All right, tell us what you do there.
I run sales at TrustPoint. I had a career before this at Goldman Sachs where I was income and mortgage sales there, and then had the joy of meeting one of my colleagues who's our COO here at TrustPoint, and so made the transition over to the technology side now.
The Goldman Sachs, like New York,
the Goldman
big
Sachs.
tall building?
Yeah. Well, actually I was on the fourth, fifth, and sixth floor, so I worked on every trading floor at the very bottom of the building.
Trading floor?
Yeah.
Like a vest in the hand signals? And
Yeah, but not that for this product. So, but in the mortgages and structured product space.
And probably not what you came to talk about today.
Not what I came to talk about today, but sales there, sales here.
There was a Hollywood movie about Goldman Sachs with Shia LaBeouf several years ago. Did you see that one?
I don't think I did.
It went very poorly. It was about the financial collapse.
Oh, it's been demonstrated in a lot of different films, be it like The Big Short or what have you. So
that wasn't you, though.
No.
You weren't in that movie.
No, I was not.
Is this your first experience with film and big?
Yeah, they don't
media?
let you talk in public at Goldman. So.
All right. Well, today we'd like to talk about something every private lender knows about: construction, fix and flip, value adds, things like that. Occasionally, the four-letter word, fund control.
Yeah.
So what does TrustPoint AI do in that regard?
So we revolutionized the process by bringing it into the digital era. So rather than a lot of fund control is borrowers emailing spreadsheets, PDFs, zip files over to their lender in terms of diligencing what's happening on site, all of that process is now through a digital portal through us. And further from that process, everything's in one place. So there's no longer discrete information sitting in a spreadsheet where it's only as good as the eyes that are on it, or in the files in PDFs as unstructured information. All the values that go through our platform become structured values, and that's really where the magic starts to begin. And from there, we that data actually can look into the data and understand kind of how that project is evolving over time. What are the kinds of red flags, or what are the kinds of gaps in information that are prudent to get ahead of sooner, so catching issues before they start to arise, and all of the third-party services, be it on-site inspections or virtual services, things like that, all through our platform. So no longer four different portals that you're looking at to try to piece it all together.
And your mission, I had to write this down because I wanted to make sure it was that I got it accurate, but I like this. Make visibility and data integrity the norm when capital funds home building and renovation.
That's spot on.
All right, well, maybe we can work that into what we're going to talk about the
Okay.
rest of the time. We'll see. All right, so everyone who's watching this has probably been burned by a construction draw, and you've seen your share of those. Those are what you guys are in a way designed to prevent, right?
Yes.
So what's the core failure that you see in the marketplace today when those things happen and you get to sort of reverse engineer them? What would have been the blinking red lights that folks ought to have paid attention to and didn't?
So I think there's a lot of different things that can happen wrong in construction. So working with TrustPoint, we deliver for you every project on the platform is scored by our health scoring system, looking at what the budget health, the schedule health, the policy health is. So as a lawyer, you'd appreciate the policy health piece. But budget health really being like that budget can evolve over time. I hear plenty of times from lenders, oh, we don't take changes. That's all well and good. If they're running into issues on a site, they're going to have to put through changes into that budget. And so you want to capture what's happening over time. One change may not be concerning, but multiple changes are concerning. Changes to a particular line item in particular where that could actually impact what the value is at the end of the day. If you take dollars out of what you had budgeted to finish in terms of your finishes, that project's going to look very different at the end of the day, for example. Also with schedule health, like you want to understand early and often how that project is evolving over time. And if you're not seeing draws, not seeing the scale of draws you need to be having, you want to be communicating with your borrower to get ahead of those issues sooner. I mean, the objective that we're really trying to achieve is these are things that a team who has perfect time and perfect information sitting in front of their screen can catch these issues, but how do you start to complement their workflow in a way that has, the table stakes for what could get caught brought up as a level, if that makes sense?
So there are very few, none, frankly, that I've ever experienced, nonprofits in this area. I mean, it's private lending, and the lender wants to make money, and all the vendors for the lender want to make money. Everybody needs to make money, or they wouldn't be in this business. That's not what business is. But a lot of times, the borrower, the owner, the old joke, the owner's going to put his money in later. What's the process that you guys use to sort of ensure that the borrower can make money too? How does that go?
At the end of the day, what's going to satisfy borrowers, and borrowers like using our platform, they log in, they see all their loans in one place from a transparency perspective. But further, the goal at the end of the day, by giving your lender more organized information, hopefully means that those dollars are getting into your pocket faster too. So by building efficiency so that that lender isn't looking at a spreadsheet that things had changed, they have to go back and forth, you've overdrawn your budget, being able to have that architecture so that submission piece is smooth on the front end means dollars faster to your borrowers. And so it's really important for us, and we built this really to think about how do you capture data for the lender, but you can't lose sight of how important the borrower is to that process for a really easy to use system. I mean, private lending, you hear it time and again, my guy doesn't use technology, he sends me a budget on a napkin. The reality is a lot of people do online banking now, and they want to have transparency in their pockets about where their loans sit at and access to their dollars. And so if this helps borrowers to be able to progress on their project faster, that's going to keep your borrowers happier.
So the equity tracking is available both to the borrower and the lender?
The equity tracking is a part of our platform in terms of how you want to configure it, but you can have it such that it's their dollars in first, depending on what kind of loan you want to do, or if you want to do something where it's pari throughout the process, it can be structured however to meet your needs or how you've structured it.
Me as a lender?
You as a lender.
So those aren't your decisions to make, you're going to find a way to...
We're not going to prohibit that process. What we're trying to do is we're just trying to facilitate the transfer of that information in a way that allows the lender to have transparency as to what was agreed to or how that's progressing over time. Because you also want to have a dynamic model where we've had lenders, a project's underway, the borrower comes back and says, hey, I got to put in a retaining wall, for example. You may approve that, but you say that needs to come out of your equity, for example. Mm-hmm. And so you need to have a dynamic and flexible system where, yes, you may have a certain construct between what's borrower and what's the lender's funds to be dispersed, but you need to have something that captures when those exceptions happen. Or further, things happen on site. What if insurance funds gets introduced? You need to be able to track those being paid out on the project to complete if there's a fire on site or things like that.
So where are places that lenders are fooling themselves? What is it that they think they have under control that they absolutely don't?
I think when you're operating off of email and spreadsheets, which honestly is our biggest competitor, you're very reliant on someone having fresh eyes when they're looking at a very complex budget and a very complex analysis of what's happening on site. And so it's a miss to think that you're always going to catch something every time. And I've had conversations with prospects where they say, no, I don't make mistakes, I don't miss things. They go to sell, especially too, they go to sell that loan to someone else. They think they've caught everything, and then all of a sudden at that point, once it's sold, they start to realize that there's issues with the budget up front, there's certain issues they overlooked on a certain change or things like that. When you're looking at spreadsheets and PDFs and things like that, it's only as good as those eyes that are on it. And so wouldn't you want to level up your team's workflow to make sure how those projects are progressing, where that data points are coming from, that there's actual systematic ways of looking at that data and further evaluating it. Someone who does a ton of lending in one market may know what a budget should look like in that particular market, but everyone's looking for growth, right? They're looking to expand where they're lending. So how do you know what a budget is going to be needed you've been lending in Southern California, and now you want to expand to New Mexico or something like that, right? How are you going to be familiar with a new market and a new space to be able to properly evaluate what those risks are?
And generally speaking, your lender clients possess sufficient agility to overcome these surprises when they occur?
Yeah, I think that they have the ability to, with their relationships with their borrowers, communicate through these changes. A lot of times the best thing that you can do to prevent those issues in the long run is getting ahead of them sooner, though. By waiting till funds have run out in the project or things like that, or once you're actually at a place where you're going to need to go through an extension, you're in a retroactive kind of correction place.
Well, sure, the ostrich approach is seldom very effective.
Yeah.
I think we'll find. All right, so tell me in plain English, what is it that TrustPoint does? When the weekend is over and it's Monday morning and you're going to get back to TrustPoint's core business, what is it?
Core business, our software, is that workflow function that I just described of submitting your draws, your budget born digitally with us, and draw and change requests all through the platform. But it's through that now all those values, we have a very rich portfolio and risk analytics suite to look at your portfolio in all different ways. Maybe you're worried about certain business lines or certain geographies, or you want to overlay what construction progress has been at a particular point. And this actually transforms the data where it's not just for your fund control team to be more efficient from an operational side, but you can have predictive analytics as it relates to cash flow forecasting. When you actually live in those budgets and how those projects are progressing, that's really important information for your treasury team to know. When you're selling loans, you have performance requirements or reporting requirements to the people you've sold loans to, the different aggregators or things like that. Rather than having to have a manual process to create that information for them, wouldn't you rather have everyone be looking at the same information in live time? What that it does for lenders to be able to open up their access to capital. Everyone's looking towards securitization, being able to tap those markets. But how do you start to have the kind of reporting quality to be able to access that space without having to hire a huge team to support that business?
And your software is useful nationwide? Mm-hmm. It is.
Yeah.
All the 50 states?
Yes.
What about out of the country, Canada, Mexico?
We've only been focused on the U.S. right now. We've had conversations with counterparties outside the U.S., but we haven't made the expansion yet.
Just America for now. Well,
yeah.
It's a plenty wide geographic scope.
Yeah, a lot to cover.
Yeah. All right, you guys emphasize visibility and data integrity. What does that mean to you, or in workflow terms? What does that really mean to you, perhaps, or the customers that you have?
It means empowering our lenders to be able to get ahead of risks sooner, and it means to be able to communicate through those issues. Like, how do you start to inform data across your organization? I touched on it a second ago, but this isn't just important for your operational team to have visibility for their own workflow and things like that, but there's implications across the rest of the organization. So to have your sales team be able to have this information at their fingertips when a borrower is calling in, or even when they're trying to think about what business do they want to go after. As a salesperson, I'd rather be calling someone saying, I see this was what was just done on your site. I see that this relates to where that construction stands at. Are you thinking about what your exit options are going to be? Can I put you into a DSCR loan? Can I put you into these things? And through data, that makes that conversation so much more informed rather than just relying on, relationship or, persistence alone from that perspective.
Does your software tell the lenders what is important to them, or do the lenders tell your software what is important to them?
So we have proprietary models that we're delivering our model results to them from that perspective, but that's always informed by our customers too. And so we're always innovating with our customers, going in new directions. I think what we've really realized is what lenders originally used our software for. Like there's plenty of efficiencies just moving off of email and spreadsheets, but you start to again realize, what does having data for the rest of your org really do, and starts to transform everyone's workflow. And so it shouldn't just be siloed off with your operations fund control team. Understanding how those budgets are progressing, understanding how those projects are progressing, that's important information all the way up through your C-suite. And you don't want to have them just be asking at the end of the month, where do things stand? Because when you're looking back, you're always looking at stale information then.
So you mentioned being siloed. How does your software prevent itself from becoming just sort of another thing that an administrative group has and rises to the level of sort of import? Or how would the lender utilize it to the best way they can?
So I think through opening up that data and access to that data out of what that fund control team is looking at and seeing on an everyday basis means the rest of the org can react in a smarter way, or even think about driving business in a smarter way. So I touched on it before, but having your treasury team accessing our platform and looking at what we're doing from a cash flow forecasting standpoint can mean that they can be more efficient about drawing on their warehouse lines to be operating on the capital that they actually need to perform for that week. You overdraw on lines, yeah, that's all, you can do it so you have cash on hand, but that's really expensive right now with where rates are, right? Having your sales team, again, to that point earlier, having your sales team be able to actually target borrowers in a way of what's that performance of, not just what your borrowers, like what loans are yes, they're meeting their milestones, they're on budget, they're on schedule, but further, like who do you always have to nag for information through that process? Like that actually impacts when you think about everyone's time spent on a borrower and things like that. So having more granular understanding of how those projects are progressing opens up everyone has data. It's just not readily accessible to the org when it's sitting with one team that's deliberating through it in a siloed fashion.
Well, and how are these blinking red lights then displayed to the lender
Every
through your
project
software?
has a health score on it, a trust point score on it. As I said, focused on your budget health, your schedule health, and your policy health. And actually, I didn't elaborate on policy health before, but policy health is like, what do you ask your borrowers to do, and do they actually do it from that perspective? And so that actually also further helps. Lenders to be able to think about how do you tailor your business to meet your borrowers where they're at. I touched on it before, but like we want to open up the data so that lenders are more informed about the risks within their portfolio and can get ahead of those issues sooner, or even be able to spend less time demonstrating that data to be able to access capital markets or access or communicate with their warehouse lines. But it's so important for us to make a really easy to use process for our borrowers, and by tailoring that experience to borrowers, because you can set those policies to where you're really meeting your borrowers where they're at. Different business lines are going to have different requirements. Different stages of the draw are going to have different requirements. And so having a personalized experience in that kind of way, but that you're always still measuring and auditing against, that means you're going to resonate really well with your borrowers, and you're also not going to have things fall between the cracks from a lending perspective or from a due diligence perspective.
From a legal standpoint, draws are kind of where deals go to die. Right? If there's going to be a problem in a construction loan, it's probably going to be related to a draw. So what does your software do to reduce these areas of conflict where draws are involved, maybe to prevent mechanics liens before mechanics liens become liens?
So we have integrations with third-party service providers to, two on the submission side, easy submission of all of your different invoices or things like that, and then smart document reading to be able to have insights into, did they actually give you everything that they said they were going to give you without having to sort through all of them, so a streamlined fashion. But then two, we have third-party service providers that you can utilize to check where your title is at in terms of if there's been any liens filed, taxes are paid. To be very clear, we're not a service provider ourselves in that kind of way, but we've really partnered with what we think of as the best-in-class service providers for our lenders to be able to access in a marketplace where they get to choose who they're consuming that service from. So be it a title search provider, or even on the inspection side, that choice is really important to us because lenders are going to have preferences of who they want to use and who they want to have doing that diligence for them.
Now, does your software provide an audit trail such that if I'm at an arbitration or, God help us, in litigation, and I've got to provide a paper trail, do I have to call a witness from you guys, or is the lender going to, through your software, have the audit trail it needs?
You have a click of a button, you have your full audit log of what's happened on that loan. So both everyone on your team who's touched it, your borrowers touched it, you know exactly who submitted what, who did what at what time.
So I'm not going to be calling you as a witness and you're raising it, like this is as close as we're going to get
Yeah,
to
I hope so.
direct
I hope so.
examination?
As someone asked me before, I was asking you guys what we were going to talk about today, and I was asking about your background as a bankruptcy attorney, and I was like, we've never talked before, and one of my colleagues made the point that that's probably a good thing if you haven't had to talk to a bankruptcy attorney. So, but yeah, hopefully we're not part of that from that perspective.
Well, in 3 decades of practice, many people will say, I hope I never have to talk to you. And it used to give me a complex, and I guess it doesn't anymore. So we're in an era where regulators and, well, even less than that, warehouse lenders and investigators want transparency. When the guy shows up with a badge or just a pen or a checkbook, what does your system do to help lenders look organized when perhaps they weren't as organized as they might have been?
Yeah, I mean, I think that speaks exactly to what we're able to do, not even when there's a badge involved or those dangerous situations, but just in general through this process, there's so many different things that a lender has to keep straight of requirements for their own policies and procedures, let alone when you start to introduce someone else's requirements, to your point about, capital and what they may require of those loans they've purchased. And I've seen it before. Customers are on our platform, that budget is in a spreadsheet, and they've got notes to themselves at the bottom and each tab for each draw. Make sure I collect this permit, make sure I check this piece. And that's the extent of that audit log from that perspective. It's not replicable, it's not transferable, it's hard to keep track of from that side of where all those pieces of information are. In our framework, that policy framework really does speak to probably the lawyer requirements. I've demoed one-on-one for some of our lenders, legal teams from that perspective, and that part really gets them excited because rather than having it to be this burdensome piece there, it can actually be for the business side to make it an ease of use practice. Because again, you're not asking for things that don't feel relevant. Like, you shouldn't be asking for permits every single time, right? They've given it to you once. Great, that can be done. Now move on to the next piece. And so it's that balancing act in lending where it's nice to ask for the world to get comfortable with things, but you want to make sure you're doing it in a way that feels like it's relevant where that project's at, what type of project it is, different requirements, light rehab, heavy rehab, things like that. And having that all natively within the software itself helps for both the team reviewing it as well as the submission side, because you don't want to burden your borrower with having to jump through extra hoops.
Okay. I did a bit of research on you before we met today as well. And your pitch says, increase capacity and confidence to manage fund control across business lines. Does that mean I can handle more loans with the same staff?
100%. 100%.
That's a definitive answer.
Yeah. You can, I mean, we've helped our lenders go through this process where they were debating hiring another person, what that cost was going to be, and being able to immediately see value out of the box using our platform to not only make it efficient for that one person they had who was doing a great job in their seat, but further when they were down the line, they got to a place where they still wanted to hire someone else. Now they have the confidence to have the kind of visibility in terms of, yes, you've got John Smith, who does a great job, but how do you get to John Smith that you're as confident with? And so our system also helps you to track understanding what that new team member, do they have different kind of approval rates? Do they have different turn times? Things from that perspective. It helps you really lean in on the training to make sure that you have a consistent team from that perspective as you grow and scale. And
your software never takes vacations, sick days, doesn't get hangovers?
It doesn't. That's the beauty of software in that kind of way.
It never will.
It won't, no. And I think to that point, you want to have that, like to your point on vacation days, having data around when your borrowers are submitting draws or when they're about to submit a draw to you, being able to have that information so you can tailor that around people's vacation times, and that kind of visibility really helps teams to improve their overall internal operations too, because you want to be prepared and be able to serve your borrowers when they need you.
So for lenders scaling across multiple states or servicing arms, what do you find breaks first?
I think you may know one market really well, but how do you think about using the data that you know in that market and then being able to utilize the data that we have across the rest of a new market? And what I mean by that is you may know what it costs to build in a particular market that you've started out in, but as you expand, how can you start to utilize data across the platform that normalizes in those areas to start to think about, does that make sense in that area? That's where it gets really powerful as you start to scale across. And you mentioned in the first part here on compliance, we are actually SOC 2 Type 2 compliant. So the tightest, someone who didn't come from technology but came from a bank level security resonated to me. And that level, we're really proud of having that certification. And that's unique within the software space.
So what does onboarding look like? How long does it take from talking to the sales team until you're running draws through your system?
It depends on your data. I'll say that piece of it. So we've moved within a week for some lenders, even 200 plus loans. They were up and running and seeing value out of our platform in less than a week. And we've had other lenders that take a longer time because they have information in multiple places. And I think through those processes, they're the ones that appreciate our software the most in the end, because it takes them, they realize how much data cleanup that we're able to help with to get everything streamlined for them going forward. So
I'm sure your answer to this your answer to this question would otherwise be, well, they need to sign up with TrustPoint. So that can't be your answer.
okay.
Other than that, if there's one thing, if you could wave your magic wand, you could have your wish granted, that every lender would do that would help them with fund control, other than signing up for your platform, what would it be?
I would say you want to make sure, as you get underway on fund control operations, if you weren't going to use us, you want to make sure you pick the right partners on the inspection side as part of the process, because regardless if you're doing virtual inspections or on-site inspections through that process, it can be very different based on which provider you're using. And so I think being careful with having the right providers, and also realizing providers are good at different products. And so having a variety of partnerships there helps to be able to serve, if you want to be in a variety of different lending products in order to complement your progress.
All right, well, thank you, Marie. I thought this was interesting, and I sure appreciate you coming here today and enduring my 15 minutes of questions. That was brave of you, especially that we didn't know each other. I think that this is an area that doesn't get a lot of attention in the private lending industry, and so it was great of Marie to come here today and share this with us, so that hopefully some of our lender clients can prevent problems before they turn into litigation.